Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Affirming Ministries International Homophobia, Transphobia, and Biphobia live stream event. My name is Shiloh Rossborough, and my pronouns are he and him, and I'm the Affirming Ministries coordinator based out of the Robertson Wesley United Church. My role is to help congregations become affirming while also providing programming, support, resources, and mentorship to 2S, LGBTQ+, and allies. I will be your host and MC for the afternoon, and it is my pleasure to welcome you all. I'm going to start off with a personal land acknowledgement. I am Métis, and my homeland exists due to my ancestors and other Métis people from many generations and across Canada. My family originated in Bay St. Paul at Red River in Winnipeg, later traveling to the Métis community in the Qu'Appelle Valley in southern Saskatchewan. I was raised and currently residing here in Treaty 6 territory, or known as Edmonton, the traditional lands of the Plain Cree, Woodland Cree, Beaver Cree, Saulteaux, Blackfoot, and Nakota Sioux peoples. It is also Region 4 of the Métis Nation. The International Day Against Homophobia, Transphobia, and Biphobia was created in 2004 to draw the attention to the violence and discrimination experienced by lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, intersex, and two-spirit people, and all other people with diverse sexual orientations, gender identities, and expressions. The date of May 17th was specifically chosen to commemorate the World Health Organization's decision in 1990 to declassify homosexuality as a mental disorder. The day represents a major global annual landmark to draw attention the decision makers, the media, the public corporation, opinion leaders, and local authorities to the alarming situation faced by people with diverse sexual orientations, gender identities, or expressions. This is why today we are gathering to hear about the stories and experiences from multiple 2S LGBTQ+ folks from all over Edmonton. Since we do not have a live audience today, we are hoping that if you have any questions for any of the speakers, to please put them in the comments, and we will do a quick Q&A before we close our time together. I would like to introduce our first speaker today, which is Gary Simpson. He is an educator and has a liberal arts and education degree. He also has a graduate degree in counseling, educational psychology, and religious education. He is a talented speaker, educator, and has tons of knowledge and experience around the LGBTQS, 2S+ community and religion. It is my pleasure to introduce Gary. I'll turn this on.
I feel like I'm preparing for clean and be ceremonially clean before I can speak. I realize I don't need to say much about homophobia, I should say, and transphobia for young and trans. You are there, you're living it every day. My hope is to give you a little bit of an insight into some of the history that people in previous generations, older generations, have lived through, better sense of what our past is as communities and kind of how we can deal with on to homophobia, biphobia, and transphobia. First, I'm going to give kind of a sense of how faith helps me keep perspective some. And for you, it may not be faith, but there may be other ways you can do this. So from some of the religious narratives in the scriptures, I get a sense of focus and how to respond. Part of that sense of how to respond and how to stand up against homophobia and transphobia comes from the fact that we were made by God from the dirt, the image of God, and that God breathed into us the breath of life. And we have that breath of life, that Spirit of God with us wherever we go. And God is a liberating God, and I get hope from the fact that God went down to find Moses because God had heard the cries of God's people. And I believe that God hears the cries of queer and trans people around the world, and that God is responding. The response from God may be kind of like the response that God had to Jeremiah. God tells Jeremiah, I called you before you were formed in the womb. Gene Robinson, who was the first openly gay bishop in the Anglican Communion, was a sick baby, and his parents were not sure he was going to live. I recall his father commenting when Gene Robinson was consecrated as bishop, and his comment was that perhaps Gene Robinson was born. You've been chosen by God, and that helps me feel more rooted when things get ugly. According to Ephesians 1 and 2, that call became for the world was created. I'm going to kind of get into some major events that I think are important. As we grow older, we remember some big events in life. If you talk to older people, they may remember things like the bombing of Pearl Harbor. Probably not very many people alive will remember that anymore. We may also remember days like the time when Robert Kennedy was assassinated. People in their late 20s may remember the terrorist attack on the World Trade Center. I remember all of those things, well, except for the bombing of Pearl Harbor. And I don't really want to admit to being that old, but I am. One that sticks in my mind, the murder of Matthew Shepard. When I was in junior high and high school, I lived in a small town, and rumor had it that in that small town there were men coming from the large city, not a long ways away, who were having sex with underage. There was an alleged incident, which I don't know if it took place, where someone was saved from that fate because they didn't want to be involved by a person who was a motel manager. Because I grew up in a very conservative Christian home, I ended up attending a Christian boarding academy in grade 12, and went on to a conservative Christian college. And here was the level of homophobia that we lived with on a day-by-day basis. The unspoken rule, which dated back at least a generation or two before me, was that in the cafeteria, everyone was to say boy, girl, boy, girl. In fact, the cafeteria was built, had a boys' entrance, dormitory, and a girls' entrance, girls' dormitory. And in years before I went to college, tradition some of the Christian colleges was you came in for the entrance for your dorm, met as you came in and got your food, and got to the end of the serving table, girl, boy, girl, because that's the way things. When I was there, there was an unwritten rule that you had to sit boy, girl, but I don't think anybody. If you got to the cafeteria at the wrong time, you might find there was no place to sit other than either beside another guy if you were a guy or beside another girl. I don't know how the girls related to that. I know what it did when you sat beside a guy. There were times when the entire table would clear. People would leave. They might even take their unfinished, they've eaten very little, dump it all in the garbage and walk out and leave. It was a nice way to get a table you could sit at, you know, a whole table to yourself, but that was the level of homophobia. There were probably about 4 or 5 people who came out after we left college. I was not aware of anyone who was out when I was at college. And I think because toxic masculinity might have been part of the reason why it was so dangerous was the DSM, that's a manual that psychologists, psychiatrists would use to diagnose mental. It had only been changed about 19, my history now. So many people who were alive when that happened, as I hadn't really quite caught up with where latest science was on issues. Older people would be taught. The fact that I went to a conservative college that believed that religion informed science, not science informing religion, meant that if it wasn't something biblically, it was science rejected. such as evolution, was rejected. You could walk by the dormitory and hear comments being yelled out the windows. When I started teaching here, after I graduated, there were rumors that female teachers, public school, hired for morality. They usually worked in small towns, and if you were perceived sexually active as a male teacher living in a small town, you might lose your job even if you were a public. It didn't feel safe, and it wasn't out at work. Because I worked and lived in a small town for much of my career, it was not a good thing to be out, and I wasn't. There were people who assumed, but it wasn't really out. I recall when AIDS hit the gay community, and it was a disease that was seen by many people to be different from God. And I remember the jokes, old enough to remember the old raid advertisements where they would see the raid, you know, and there'd be this spray goes off and it says, "Raid kills, ants dead." The joke was that AIDS killed gay men dead. Later, years later, when it was safer to be out at work, a pastor got the sense that I was gay. I think he might have assaulted me physically if there hadn't been other people. I was enraged and struggling a lot to keep it. I remember Matthew Shepard. I was a part of a religious discussion group, and about twice a year we'd get onto the topic of homosexuality, and we'd get, and it had gotten ugly again. I remember my taking the role of, well, you know, we need to be kind and generous, please treat each other nicely, don't use extreme comments, was kind of what I was commenting, but I was pretty closeted. I'm gay, and you don't understand. We're fighting for our lives. Words after that, Matthew Shepard. I didn't know what that meant, so I Googled, we didn't back then, but I searched on the internet and was able to find that he was alive in a hospital in Fort Collins because gay, 21 years old. He died Canadian Thanksgiving weekend. And Thanksgivings for me. At a press conference, Matthew Shepard's father had to work best all the threats. And there were people from a very homophobic Baptist church, Westboro Baptist Church. Their pastor was Fred Phelps. They picketed at Matthew Shepard's funeral. They picketed times when people went to the courthouse to be able to see the trial of those charged with crimes in connection with his murder. And there were people who took it upon themselves to wear a massive stand between Westboro Baptist Church and courthouse so people wouldn't have to see the horrible sign. And I remember every time somebody came through the trial system, and there were about 4, if I recall right, that went. There'd be a flood of people, memorial sites, Shepherd. Some of the people were struggling very story of what had happened. I also remember Delvin Green, who was a gay lab instructor at King's College. Currently King's University, was fired because he was gay. I remember how angry it was in Alberta when people just livid. He would dare want to be protected by human rights legislation in connection with his job, because the Alberta government did not protect sexuality in human rights legislation. The United Church of Canada sought and achieved status on behalf of the Alberta. And the money to help fund the United Church support system came from this congregation, Robertson Wesley United. If you're a member of Robertson Wesley United Church, we're back then, thank you. Very proud of what you. Lori Blakeman, who was the MLA for Atlanta at that time, said she recalled how tense it was if the legislature down from the Supreme Court. Cut the atmosphere with a chainsaw, I think. Meant. Delvin Breen's father told an emotionally gripping story to me at Pride one year. Delvin Breen's father and mother were at farmers markets. They would have young gay men come up to them and say, I've been disowned by my family. Will you adopt me? Tears in his eyes, he very moved years later, reflecting on young men who've been disowned by their families and were wanting somebody still in the role. After I came out, I ended up becoming much more active, fighting for gay rights recognition, both inside and outside the church, LGBT rights. I did experience some threats online. I'm going to outline some of the major events that took place because some of them are very important, some of the Canadian history, which I think is important for us to know. 1967, Pierre Trudeau, who was the Justice Minister, introduced legislation to legalize consensual same. The law decriminalizing it was 1969. Then there was the forming of the currently known as the Metropolitan Community Church, the first congregation founded in 1968 by Troy Perry. I'm not sure if Pierre Trudeau in Canada or Troy Perry, MCC, responsible for people at Stonewall thinking it was a riot when the police in, as they often did. But we do know the order was there. First, Pierre Trudeau, legalization of same-gender Canada. Secondly, the founding church, the largely queer trans denomination in Stonewall. As Canadians, if you're watching this as a Canadian, ought to be proud of. We were part of that change. For a person of faith, you have a lot to be proud of as well. Close to the end of the time here, I'm going to see if I can conclude with a story that is an Edmonton and an Alberta story. Homosexuality was in the DM, so if you were a gay man and you were picked up by the police, you would be taken to Alberta Hospital, where you would be assessed to see. There was a lady in the city who worked there, Evelyn Fry. She was a great activist. And she said when these young guys were being brought in by the police, buddy, there's nothing wrong with these. They're good kids. Evelyn Fry's comment once, in a public meeting, I have 5 sons. My only regret is that and that in life, one of the most prominent gay rights activists I watched she. I comment, you are an incredible, you are a gift from God to mirror and see that queer, trans faith, dignity, and with respect. You are
I just want to say thank you, Gary, for that immersed information on history and queer history and the struggles that we've faced in the past and still now. And thank you for those words of affirmation. Our next speaker has graciously recorded her experience around connecting spirituality and social justice as a queer minister. She's a great friend, a mentor, and a listener, and I'm honored to introduce Reverend Erin Thomas, and we will tune into her video message now.
Good day to you, friends. My name is Pastor Erin Thomas, and I am the Associate Pastor at Trinity Lutheran Church in Edmonton, Alberta. My pronouns are she, hers, and I am a bisexual, pansexual, and queer person. I'm also a recovering evangelical. I was born and raised into a fundamentalist family where both my parents were pastors for a time, and I attended various denominations across the evangelical spectrum. Like many queer, trans, and non-binary folks emerging from conservative religious traditions, I've had to take on a perilous journey of healing and reconciliation. I have needed to capture my own love for God in ways that included loving myself and loving what it means to be queer. I wish I could say that all church spaces are now actively trans, non-binary, and queer embracing, but we all know this dream is still in the process of becoming a reality. Thanks to the lives, voices, and efforts of so many who have gone on before us, many strides have already been made. Part of my calling now is to create more strides where and when I can. I want to focus today, though, on my initial interactions with the LGBTQ2SIA community. My first attempts at reaching out for support and connection way back when I realized I was a queer person were not positive. There was a good deal of contempt, derision, mockery, and hostility towards people who called themselves bisexual. I was referred to as pretending to be a lesbian, as being nothing more than a curious straight person, as being someone more interested in using and abusing real queer people. After being assured that I would find acceptance and support in these spaces, I was horrified to be confronted with such biphobic backlashes. All because gender didn't seem to matter to me in terms of who I was attracted to or who I interacted with. So I backed away. I was not welcome to be my full self in religious spaces, nor was I welcome to find family and friendship in queer, non-binary, and trans spaces. I didn't know what to do, or who to turn to, or where to go. All of those secrets I kept to myself, and I bore the brunt of this difficult journey on my own shoulders. All I really wanted to do was to create deep, abiding friendships with people who understood the confusion about being attracted to people of multiple genders, about trying to heal from the wounds of purity culture, and ask questions about why in the world I was attracted to women the majority of the time, but every so often, a gent would turn my head. Did that mean I really was only a pretend lesbian? Did that mean I was a liar or a fake? Did that mean I really didn't exist? Now, truthfully, not every single LGBTQ2SIA+ person I met then was actively biphobic. But the bias was strong enough that I was far too terrified to keep putting myself out there. There was already enough abuse from the religious community to contend with. I did not need it from a community supposedly proud of its welcoming spaces. What ended up happening was that I began to focus on my spiritual aspect of my person. Rather than trying to force my way into spaces where I wasn't wanted, I exited toxic religious spaces, while also refraining from entering any kind of a queer space. I had my own healing work to do, and inviting more trouble than I felt I could handle in the moment didn't seem a wise choice for my own journey in the moment. And it really was a terribly lonely journey. So many different aspects of me were buried and kept secret. I battled shame, loneliness, depression, among other things. I won't ever say it all made me a stronger person. Strength, I think, sometimes is overvalued in our society. My experiences all have shaped who I am as a person, and that person is strong and weak, high and low, clear and confused, and all the prismatic spaces in between. What the journey did offer me was time alone with God. The lack of connection from both these powerful spaces pushed me into a kind of a wilderness where I was free to deconstruct old notions of God, to meet God in new ways, even if they were unwelcome or frightening at first, and to discover who I was as a person. I began to awaken to my own sets of privileges, a journey I will be awakening to for my whole life, I should think. Privilege is a powerful beast, after all. I began to step into seeing myself in new ways, ways not defined by one religious community or another, or any kind of specific group within the queer community. Rather, it was all unfettered and unchained. Would I have wished for companionship during these years? You bet. Every day. It's certainly not a path I would recommend to anyone. But there certainly were benefits and blessings that came out of the process that I went through. And that all said, times have changed. I would say non-binary, trans, and queer spaces have certainly come a long way. We have journeys yet to go, but that's a part of being human together. We are able to have fuller, richer, deeper understandings of gender, orientation, expression, and fluidity than ever before. We are growing into our own dreams and visions of acceptance and love. Yes, we have ways to go, but yes, we have come so far. To all of you who are bisexual, pansexual, and queer, know this: you are good. You are holy and you are loved as you are. Your attractions are good. Your relationships are good. And you need not justify your existence to anyone. Your capacity to love is both broad and deep, and heaven knows we need as many expressions of love in this world as possible, especially now. I see you, and I thank God for you. If you ever want to connect or chat or ask questions, I'm here. Reach out. I'd love to hear from you. Peace to you all. Thank you.
they meant from the German text. They go, I am lost to the world, with which I used to waste so much time. It has for long known nothing of me. It may well believe that I am dead, nor am I at all concerned. If it should think that I am dead, nor can I deny it, for truly I am dead to the world. I am dead to the world's tumult, and rest in a quiet realm. I live in my heaven, and in my song, in my love and in my song. I think because of the prejudice and discrimination that we face as minorities, that we often feel the world this way. I will begin.
to Melissa for blessing us with her voice and talent, and there's been a few comments saying thank you for your wonderful voice, so thank you. Our next speaker is a talented writer and speaker. She is a great friend, a loving parent, daughter, and sister. We are graciously blessed with her story and her experience. So please help me welcome Dorothy. All right, make sure. Up and go.
You'll have to forgive. My name is she and her. I have lived all in stand here, count all of it. So for me, my life, time, fear. It was limited by fear. I was afraid of being a trans person. I was afraid that if I chose to go out in public, I would not pass as a woman, that I would be subject to ridicule, possibly even violence. I was afraid that I would lose the people I love, my family, my friends. I would lose the ability to have a job or have a home because I was trans. And more than anything else, I was afraid of losing God. I was so afraid of what God thought of me about being trans that I came close to committing suicide on more than one occasion. All that changed when I found the United Church. They loved me, accepted me, they affirmed me, and they helped me see that God loved me, accepted me, and affirmed me as I was, as Dorothy, that I am fearfully and wonderfully made. I can't even begin to express the gratitude I have for that. They made it possible for me to begin a journey towards a transition with lots of hesitations and missteps, mistakes, and falling back into fear often. But they were there for me. And because they were there for me, I'm able to stand here in front of you today as a transitioned woman, or at least as far as I am able to go under my circumstances. So, if I can leave you people with a point, one thought I'd like you to kind of take with you when you think about this or you go on with your day is, while I really appreciate I'm going to assume if you're watching this, you're against homophobia, you're against transphobia, you're against biphobia. You don't like those things, you don't want those things. But I want to encourage you to do more than just simply be against them. I want you to try and affirm homosexuals, trans people, bisexuals, the queer people, whatever. Affirm them. Give them a safe place, because you might be the only one who does. And that can make an incredible difference in their lives. And in fact, it can save their lives. So, when we think about fear, and we see a lot of it out there, there's a lot of people who are scared of a lot of different things. And being what I am, I can see that it can be scary for somebody who's never experienced that, never seen that, never known anybody who has it. So that's where you people will have to come in. You'll have to tell them about your friend, Dorothy, who is a good woman, who loves her family, who is a good writer, and is a trans woman. And as much a woman as any woman ever been. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dorothy, for sharing your experiences and your stories and reminding us that we're all human and we're all our own people underneath the identities that we hold. I'm honored to introduce our second performer of the afternoon and our last, singer-songwriter Emmett Michael, drawing on his experiences of transitioning from female to male, living with mental illness, and battling addiction. Songs carry a tone of desperation and sorrow. His music conveys a message that is both powerful and vulnerable. He is a talented artist, a great friend, and I am pleased to have him share his story and his talents today. You'll see the video shortly.
Hello, my name is Emmett Michael, and I am a singer-songwriter from right here in Edmonton, Alberta. I identify as both queer and trans, and I'm so excited to be able to present to you on today's International Day Against Homophobia, Transphobia, and Biphobia. Like so many, I am not a stranger to any of these concepts, especially as somebody who identifies as a Christian and grew up in a faith-based community. That was something that I had to face, and I was really lucky in that I was accepted by a lot of people in the church, but that wasn't the case across the board. And I would say more so as of recently, I've been using songwriting as a tool to really talk about the feelings that come with being rejected by a faith community, and the way that that makes you feel in turn, like maybe you've been rejected by your higher power too, and that you're not able to have a relationship to your spirituality anymore. And I found that faith and being queer are not mutually exclusive identities. I recently released a song called God-Shaped Hole that's all about my experience coming out as transgender in the church. And it talks about what I believe unconditional love should really look like. So yeah, this is God-Shaped Hole. So long, farewell, goodbye. I've got wars still left to fight. Tooth and nail, eye for an eye. If love's revenge, you've got it right. And there's been far too little grace from people claiming to be saved. All God's children spewing hate, digging graves and saving face. I used to always pray I wouldn't wake the next day, still feeling like my body's left my soul betrayed. But God don't make mistakes. It's no mistake that I was made. And you don't know, well, you don't know. All our hearts a God-shaped hole. I'm so far from perfect, still don't admit my own defeat. And my doubts, my greatest defect, all my fears crippling. I wish I wasn't always quiet when I needed to speak up. I wish my words were always gentle when I spoke about love. still roams alone like a ghost underground. Why am I most lonely when I'm standing in a crowd of people of the faith? I hope someday that could change, 'cause you don't know, well, you don't know all our hearts are God-shaped hole. Tell me, how'd you make it look so easy? Kick me while I'm down on my knees, praying for the strength to love you like he loves me. And tell me, oh, how'd you make it look so easy? Kick me while I'm down on my knees, praying for the strength to love you like he loves me. I spent a lot of time in my early adolescence, and I know that this is really common within the queer community, really trying to suppress who I was and not have to face who I was. And I used drugs and alcohol as a means of coping with those feelings and trying not to feel those feelings for a really, really long time. But when I reached the end of that period and I had gone to treatment, it was there that I was hit with the realization that spirituality was still really important to me. And what faith looked like for me was going to have to dramatically shift, given the nature of how church spaces are. And when I was trying to get back into that community, my partner and I went to a really large Christian conference. And overall, I was having a really good time. And then near the end, this guy gets on the stage and he starts talking about all of the people who will not inherit the kingdom of heaven. And of course, on that list are the homosexuals. And I remember just like, that was just a breaking point for me. And I just started sobbing and over again, just saying why. And I was collapsed in my partner's arms, just saying why over and over. And realizing that what I meant was like, why was I given this queer identity? And now the question for me becomes, why would I ever want to change something that is so intrinsically me, that I believe I was created to be, and that I'm not meant to deny that part of myself. And as I said, I was writing more recently about this stuff, and this is a song that I actually wrote a couple of years ago, and I just found it in my journal and was like, oh yeah, this. And I guess I wasn't ready to present it to the world yet, but now I am, and the song is called Church Window. Wipe off the dust from me, make my fingers clean. I've got hands to touch, but I might spread disease. I might spread disease. I might spread disease. Slow dance in our kitchen, hold hands in our church pew. Who are we not to belong, and who are they to choose? Who are they to choose? I won't leave in your mother's womb. I think I'm on fire. Someone told me so, that I'd be crawling hands and knees outside a church window, outside a church window, outside a church window. Stained glass my worldview, send me up in smoke. Even if I shake it off, you'll smell it on my clothes. You'll smell it on my clothes. Ooh. I won't leave you, nor forsake you. I knew you before I knew you in your mother's womb. Thank you again very much for having me. Stay safe out there. Take care of yourselves and each other. Much love to you all.
Thank you, Emmett, for sharing a little bit more of your story and blessing us with your talented music and your new song. Our next speaker is Reverend Sally Boyle. She was ordained 44 years ago and has held many roles within the church. Over the years of her ministry, her theology has expanded and changed to incorporate liberation, then feminist, then Asian theologies.
It's my great honor to be here in this role, to speak to all of you about some of my experiences in the United Church. It's also my great honor to be one of the two ministry personnel in this congregation and in this community, as it has been a very fulfilling experience for me to round out my retirement. Well, no. It's going to be my launch into retirement. One hopes it will be the third launch into my retirement. So we'll see how it goes. I was ordained in the United Church of Canada. Shiloh said 44 years ago. That's probably close. Whenever 1976 was. And in 1976, the church knew very little about what it might mean to be a gay or lesbian person in the church. Except maybe that there were a lot of organists. We used to joke that if all of the gay organists would go on strike on the same Sunday, the church would suddenly and quite abruptly become affirming, because music is so incredibly important in our lives. And there wouldn't have been many musicians left without the folk who are either gay or lesbian. Well, of course, our language expanded over the years. I've not done a very good job of keeping up with all the letters. I was hopeful at one point that the word queer was going to be it. We could take off and go with that one and kind of save ourselves the letters. And then I realized that queer didn't do it for me. And if it didn't do it for me, it probably didn't do it for a whole lot of folk. We need our own sense of our own identity. It's critical to who we are in the world. And if it takes a lifetime of exploration to sort out what that is, then please God, may we spend a lifetime exploring. In the meantime, I said I'd talk a little bit about what my journey through life in the church has been about. And I suppose especially my life as I became involved in Affirm United from its very beginnings. I got a phone call one night at midnight from my colleague who lived in the neighboring pastoral charge. This was about 1978. Unbeknownst to the church, they'd put a gay man and a lesbian right beside one another. Unbeknownst to us for a little while as well. But Malcolm phoned me about midnight and said, "Sally, we have to form a group and then we have to have a name." It was midnight. I'd been asleep. I thought he was nuts. So I said, "Okay, a group." And we need a name? Why? Well, the church was beginning to provide funding for organizations to gather so that we could encourage the church to become more affirming. But you had to have a name, and you had to be a group. So the two of us started at midnight one night in 1978, the group called One Loaf, and that started for us in Saskatchewan. At that point, there was Touch, which was the Toronto Organization of United Church Homosexuals. There was Vouch, which was the Vancouver Organization of United Church Homosexuals. We had One Loaf, and I think there were others, and I'm not remembering all of those names right now. So we formed One Loaf, and then Malcolm and I proceeded to find folk who might join us to gather. We decided we wanted to gather more to worship than maybe otherwise. We also discovered that our community wanted to gather more to worship. We were drawing on church folk, and that was the focus, but it quickly expanded beyond church folk into people who simply heard that this was a place that they could come where they would be welcome. One of the experiences that sits with me from early days in that organization was a meeting in Regina. By the way, my context, I grew up in Saskatchewan, and I grew up in southern Saskatchewan on a farm where the word homosexual had never been heard by anybody for thousands of miles around. Okay, hundreds. But when someone first referred to me with that, what sounded like a derogatory term, I had to go home and look it up in the dictionary. I had no clue what they were talking about. So, back to Regina. When I was, I don't know, the ripe old age of maybe 27 or 28, I drove 4 hours from northern Saskatchewan to be in Regina to join with this group. And we were gathered around a table in a church basement, which was a step up from where we normally gathered. Gay and lesbian folk, generally speaking, got together in the bowels of some building somewhere having traveled down a back alley and just entering the little door that was under the one light bulb that you could see glowing. And so going into a church basement was really kind of, well, a major step up. We went through normal doors and down a regular staircase and into a room in the basement of a United Church in Regina. And while we were sitting there, in the midst of prayer, we discovered that one of the women who joined us was a woman from a Quaker community who didn't claim to fall into any of the diverse sexual orientation positions of the day, but who did want to join us because, as she herself said, you're the most welcoming group of people I've ever been privileged to join. And so she would occasionally just invite us to sit in quiet because that's the Quaker way. On this particular evening, a young woman, probably 20, 21, came through the door incredibly nervous. And rather than joining our circle around the table, she took a seat off against the wall. And we asked her to join us, and she said no. We asked if there was anything that she wanted us to hear from her, and she said only that she needed to have the devil removed from her. And could we do that, please? We said that we weren't really the right people to talk to for that. We weren't into removing devils. We were into celebrating a gift that she was and is, I hope, still in the world. And she sat with us for a long, long time. And then a very angry man burst through the door and grabbed her arm and started to drag her out. And the Quaker woman, bless her heart, because a couple of us were about to slither across the table and grab that man by his throat, the Quaker woman got up and said to him, "Sir, you are not welcome here," and escorted him to the door. He burst back in, and so she got up again and said, "Sir, you are welcome here, but we ask that you join our circle." He refused and grabbed again the young woman by her arm to drag her out of the room. And so a third time he was asked either to join our circle or to leave. Sadly, at that point, the young woman chose to leave in order to get him out of our space. And even more sadly, we did not ever see her again. The Quaker woman in our midst asked that we join hands. It was hard. It was hard to enter into a time of silence and prayer in the midst of what we had just been a part of and unfortunately not been a part of. Because more than anything, we wanted that young woman to find a place where she would feel at home and at peace. And clearly she did too. I think that sparked me to become increasingly open. I didn't publicly come out until 10 years after that. 1988. For those of you who are old enough and churched enough, you know the year 1988. It was a watershed year. It was the year that the United Church of Canada proclaimed that it would not discriminate on the basis of sexual orientation, race. There was a list of stuff, but it started with sexual orientation, and it said that we would not be barred from ministry based only on our orientation. And clearly, if our theology was kind of not quite there might be some questions asked, but not based on orientation. Well, we got there because a group of us in 1980 started what we called at that point Affirm. It was the overarching United Church organization for justice-seeking gay and lesbian folk in the church. That's basically who we were at the start. And so the members of One Loaf, those of us who felt like we could be out to the degree that we would go and meet with other gay and lesbian folk from across Canada in the church, the members of Touch in Toronto and Bouch in Vancouver, some folk from Winnipeg, and eventually some folk from the East Coast. Took a while. Gathered for our very first gathering in Vancouver. It's indescribable, and my stories are going to get all mixed because, you know, it was the day before yesterday, not just yesterday. But one of the best stories that I remember was of a young woman in ministry who said, "I didn't think I was going to be able to get here. I have no money." And of course, we were on our own. I mean, we had to find the funding. The church funded us to go all across Canada to tons of other things, but not to this. So we dug deep and found our own funding, often with people in our own community saying, "Here's $10, add this to your, your basket of funds and get yourselves there to represent us." Anyway, she didn't think she was going to get there. But then she told us that the biggest homophobe in her home congregation had died 2 weeks previously. So when she was asked to do the funeral, she took the funeral money and she put it into the plane ticket to get her to the Affirm meeting. It's a wonderful story. I mean, that's how to take and use what we're given for the best possible outcome, I think. But we worked as an organization at discovering ways by which we might find folk who would advocate with us. This upcoming Sunday is Pentecost Sunday, and I've been doing some work in preparation. And one of the things that Jesus promises us is an advocate. And thank God, because we all need them. So we worked to find advocates, and we called them friends. The people who weren't just standing behind us, but they were beside us on those occasions when, for me, it only happened, I think, 4 times. The congregation said, "I'm sorry, you can't be our minister anymore, you have to leave." When those things happened, we knew that there were folk here in the church who, despite all else, would be there for us as we cried our way through it and moved on to the next and on to the next. So Affirm became Affirm and Friends. And Affirm and Friends functioned as almost 2 organizations. we were working so hard to get ourselves together at the outset that we asked our friends to gather on their own and discern for themselves what actions they might take that would support the church community in moving forward. And it became quite a remarkable movement, such that by 1988, there were thousands of petitions to the General Council meeting of the United Church of Canada. That's our big overarching meeting that at that point was happening annually, and we've now budget cuts. We're down to 3 times a year, and sometimes in very different styles now. But at that point, we met in Victoria on the university grounds. Apparently, some people were frightened because it was longer than a 4-day meeting. I'm going to say an 8-day meeting. The day of the vote on all of these petitions, which were basically asking the church to accept gay and lesbian people as full participants in the life and work of the church, including the ministry. The day that that vote was to be taken, we were held in that room until 2:30 a.m. as all of those who were against lined up and cycled through the microphones to have their voice heard. The next morning, when we entered the building, there were armed guards walking the level above, overlooking where we were gathering outside our meeting space. Wherever we have challenged what might be considered to be normative, we have also brought out the best and the worst in people. Sadly, the worst has created situations like Matthew Shepard, about whom I hadn't thought for a while, and thank you for raising him again. It was a heart-wrenching kind of time. The worst continues to bring out that which we see happening occasionally on the grounds of our Parliament buildings here, and certainly various places throughout the United States, where it has become abundantly clear yet again that the dragon is raising its ugly head, and that we will be called upon again to be strong, to be courageous, to use our voice for ourselves, where others may speak, but it can only be on behalf of themselves. We continue to have a mission as this community of, well, the gathered throng of wayward folk. We're not different from others in any way that I don't love differently. Sadly, I don't hate differently either. I don't fear differently. When I'm cut, I bleed the same. And when I pray, I know full well that there is one family of God. We are all a part of that family. And no one is to be left behind. Thanks be to God for giving us our own voice, and the voice of our advocates.
Thank you, Sally, for those words of encouragement and reminding us of the grassroots of Affirm and the experiences and turmoil that the community faced in those early years. So thank you. I'm pleased to announce our next speaker and our last speaker for this afternoon. He has been a great friend and a mentor to me as a young queer Indigenous person. He is a knowledge keeper, an elder, and a helper, and he has so much experience and stories, so I don't want to take up too much of your time. So I'm going to introduce him right away here. So please help me welcome RW. To announce our next speaker and our last speaker for this afternoon. He has been a great friend and a mentor to me as a young queer Indigenous person. He is a knowledge keeper, an elder, and a helper, and he has so much experience and stories, so I don't want to take up too much of your time. So I'm going to introduce him right away here. So please help me welcome RW.
Ooh. Is it on?
To announce our next speaker and our last speaker for this afternoon. He has been a great...
Sorry. Can you hear me?
Has been a great friend and a mentor to me as a young queer Indigenous person. He is a knowledge keeper, an elder, and a helper, and he has so much experience and stories, but I don't want to take up too much of your time. So I'm going to introduce him right away here.
Have you got me? Can you guys hear me? I can't hear anything from anybody, so. Okay. Bonjour, wafshki kikabo nadishnikas ganyigahaga onkwamwe, mishki kedo them, Ashwega Six Nations and Dunjba, Nishmana Duak. And my Christian name is RW. My spirit name is White Bear Standing. I was born Six Nations on the Grant. Ganyigahaga is Mohawk people of the Flint of the Iroquois Confederacy. And I'm part of, for 30 years now, with the Ojibwe Three Fires Medallion Teachings and Nish Manaduak, Two Spirit. Wow, I'm rather overcome this afternoon with all the words that have been spoken and shared in the stories because of each of every one of you. It's a part of my life that has been along the same roads. But I was asked by Shiloh to join you today and speak a little bit about, for me, my own experiences within as a Two-Spirit person, as a gay person, as an Indigenous person in a white settler church and Christianity. So I don't want to say it was easier for me, but I was born or adopted into a fourth-generation minister's family. And I shared on something else earlier in the week that and I heard those words said today too, there was always that one piece of scripture that we all kind of know, I believe, that was always thrown at us. And the one that would not allow us or not be able for us to get into the kingdom of heaven. And a part of that is 1 Corinthians 6, 9 through 10. There's two of those, but in this one too, it's, man shall not lie with man. And whenever I used to hear that on the pulpit as a youngster sometimes, or in my father's services, but it wasn't directed at me, his son per se, of course, but even as a youngster, I would sit back and I would kind of roll my eyes and I would think always, oh, here we go again. Because somehow I never did believe that then, and I certainly don't today, of course. But I was able to, and I think by sheer stubbornness somehow sometimes to leave that because that had to deal with others. That wasn't me. And because I always had a faith from a youngster on, I cannot say and share in all honesty that it was a blind faith, but I had a faith through it all. In large part, much credit to my parents, because in my parents, and maybe because in part that I share at times in those days in the 70s and the 80s growing up, when we lived in Holland in a lot of my formative years, my parents were very open, very liberal. So we had, they stood beside me. They stood in front of me, behind me, and my sister, and I was well protected. I was kind of insulated, you could say. And later on in my teens, when I knew around age 6, 7 that there was something that was different. One of the examples I always share a little bit is on one of our holidays, and I'm dating myself, in the 60s from Suriname. When we lived in South America, we went to Tobago a few times. And one time there was this young American chap just hanging out, diving for lobsters for the summer. But both my sister and I, and we were only, I don't know, 6, 7 or so, wanted to spend time with him just because he also had a cute dog. I remember that. But I already knew then, I just wanted to hug him all the time. And so I already knew at an early age that there was something within me that wasn't the same as everybody else. Later on in my teens, when I heard, I believe it was Reverend Aaron that spoke about that a bit, that we went through a phase, and I did too, calling ourselves or myself bisexual, because it would leave perhaps the onslaught that would be said to me wouldn't be as severe or harsh. I once heard a quote apparently said by, I think it was either David Bowie or so, that said he wasn't going to go through life with one hand tied behind his back. So I used that for a lot of my teenage years and my early adult years. And there was a time, I remember one night when my mother came up to say goodnight, and she sat on the bed. And that's when you know you're going to have, okay, here it comes, the conversation of some sort. And I remember my mother asking me, and I think I was about 14, 15, somewhere 16, maybe even, whether I want to be a boy or a girl. And I said, no, I want to be a boy. That's me, and I don't like that. And very little was ever said. I don't know until much later years whether anything by congregation members had been said to them. And I shared recently with my sister that somehow I regret, now that both my parents are gone, we never did have that conversation. I never did ask mom or dad, was there anything ever said to you about the fact that you had not only an adopted son who was First Nations, but also one who turned out to be gay? I heard a little bit speaking of this morning also about the beginning of some of the inroads for church for me. And I remember being in Toronto in the late 70s, and I had a boyfriend at the time, and we got word somewhere that there was a gay church starting up. And it was in Bathurst, in a school just off Bathurst there in one of the classrooms. So we went a few times to hear and to see what this was all about. It was, and I believe it was Gary Simpson that mentioned it, that the initial startup was by Troy Perry in the States, and then here by who many of us do know, have come to know, Reverend Brent Hawks. And it was his very beginnings of starting it up, an MCCT chapter, although I didn't understand all the politics at the time, of course, and some of it I still don't, but it was a beginning. And although for myself, I can honestly say I've never overly felt uncomfortable in church growing up, I do know today that in large part it was because I was kind of a little bit in a secure bubble. because I was the minister's son, very few people ever really said anything to me. So I had that kind of protection. And it wasn't until many years later, in the 80s and so in the 90s, that I started learning about many of the hardship our people have had as LGBTQ2 folk within the church, and some of the hurts and the pains that it has caused. I kind of somehow came around those. We heard too, like with the AIDS crisis, the epidemic, the initial onslaught, in the beginning, especially the first few years, but there was the other side of it. Who was looking after the spiritual side of those that were dying? Those were days that you could be diagnosed today and 6 months later you were gone. And again, at that time in Toronto, at least when I was living there, it was Brett Hawkes and the church, the MCCT, that had so many funerals. It's horrendous to think about. There was in Toronto too, when I started learning already in the late 70s that my place as an Indigenous person once held a place in community, that once held a place in our towns and villages of something not special in the sense that it was kind of, where you were the top of the heap or on top of the pyramid, but a place of a respect, a place of a specific kind of life and work that came from spirit. So when I started learning about those teachings, about those Nishmanadua, and in those days, before a lot of our languages have changed over the years, it was often, we were known as the Burdash. And that's the word that at the time was used very often. And that was the first word that I learned myself, because the phrase Two Spirit had not been coined yet. That came in 1990. So learning about those teachings, learning about the history that is in my DNA, that special part, was a huge gift. That started for me all throughout from the late 70s, but certainly through the 80s. Again, in Toronto, through the AIDS onslaught. I often speak of this. Also, we had an elder there. He passed away 2 years ago now, or 3 years, it's 2021 today, in 2019, Vern Harper. He was the only elder at the time in the 80s and the 90s doing sweats specifically for our Two-Spirit guys. He would be able to make sure through Anishinaabe Health in Toronto that he had been given some land by the United Church of Canada in Guelph. He had built the sweat lodges there, a few cabins for changing and for the feast afterward. But he made sure that he was able to bring out our HIV positive boys for sweats. And I was a part of that for a little while. It's part of that not only deepened my faith, and then certainly throughout the 1990s, I now have a foundation in my faith, a foundation with Christ, a foundation that it's not so much, they're two different worldviews, yes. They're two very opposites, and yet somehow I'm able to weave them together. I have them encircled together. And together, for me, they have given me a foundation in my life that I've never had before. I think of, especially today, of the strengths and the resilience that as gay and lesbian folk, we've had to have. I think of the strength of those of my generation and the ones just before us. And for the ones that are now, after us, and some of the young folk and on this gathering today, this morning, afternoon, of the possibilities and the joy and the gratitude that I have today of what is possible. I remember in the late 70s and the early 80s with two of my friends who were both also Nishmanaduak. We were walking around Toronto and we had this idea that someday we would be the three grandmothers going around Skutmekwe, Turtle Island, bringing two-spirit teachings. Because at that time, there were very few of us around. There were even less doing some of this work. Of the three, I'm the one today left standing to do some of this. But I've also said with amazement of this last decade for sure, when I look around and I sit here, what has happened? There's so many just popping up all over. It's almost like dandelions. Like they're all over and they're all coming back to culture. Because for me, my foundation, strength, the stability came when I, as an Indigenous person, through a good life of my adoption, came back to culture. Because without my culture, I would not have the strength. Well, I don't know, of course, but it's added to my life as a gay person. It's added to my life because I identify today as that Nishmanaduak. I have since the mid-90s very little to do by my own choice and things like that with a gay life of a Western side. Creator, and when I bring this around, and that's what I'd like to do for the rest of my life, to bring that teaching that we have in Ojibwe in the lodge. We have a specific creation story that the very spiritual community role of that third being, which is the two-spirit, was specifically thought and brought about by Creator. Because it was already in the four worlds before we come here, before we physically placed here as we are today in this physical life. So it's in the plant world, it's in the rock world, it's in the insect world, it's in the animal world, as we know. So when he placed man here and when he placed women here, why would he not have that third being to bring the balance between the two of us? And I think the resurgence is because it's in our prophecies. We were told at one time as the two-spirit by the aunties and the grandmothers and clan mothers, we had to bury our bundles because we had to fit in. We had to disguise ourselves to fit in to survive. We had to learn those lessons. But that time would come when the balance would be needed and we would dig them up. We would start coming back to the songs. We would look at the teachings and the ceremonies. That is that resurgence. So those prophecies, when I hear those from an Indigenous worldview that we have in those creation stories, it's right on track. I bring that into the church. I indigenize when I sometimes do services and I try to bring some of this in. But this is a creation story that I would beg our young people that don't have this, because it's not in Genesis. There's no specific creation story in the Bible for two-spirit, gay, lesbian people. Borrow ours. Borrow ours for as long as you need it to get that foundation, to get that strength to go on, to have that self-love, because without that self-love, I don't have anything. I don't have the foundation either. Borrow it for as long as you need. Because we need you. I need you around. It is so vital. I remember when we just heard too of the 1988 vote. My parents, Reverend John Hoekstra, and my mom had been there. And I remember they called me to say, and they were very enthusiastic and happy. And they said, well, the vote just went through and, it was a yes. And I remember saying to them, oh, great. It's about time. Because I never understood, and I still don't. That's one part of me. What your own sexuality has to do with the church, but at the same time, I also know fully well, and I've seen it and heard it firsthand, the damage that it has been done of being able to be who you are up front, to not have to hide, to have our young ones not run away and commit suicide because perhaps their lives at home are already not what mine has been. And so, but they also don't have the aunties and their uncles to guide them, to strengthen them, to support them, to pick them up when they fall. Not to force them to walk into their shoes, but in their own pathway, but to pick them up. It's very hard. Being Nishmanaduak, gay, lesbian, it is a hard life because many times, and especially for us, for those that are part of the church, again, you also lose another whole slew of friends sometimes because you're part of the church, so you're afraid that you're going to always be, complaining about whether they drink too much of this or that. But it's a hard life. But it is one today that I will try to fulfill to my best, to bring about those teachings. And even if that's all I do, is share that creation story of the Lodge with all of you, for those that need it. Take it to heart, borrow it. And when you have the strength, and when you have that self-love, when you're well on your way, give it back to the Lodge and then pass it on to someone else. Which you gotta get
RW, we have no questions thus far. So if you'd like to close us in our prayer, we can do that.
Sorry, can you say that one more time?
Of course. We have no questions, so we can end off on the prayer.
Oh, okay. So I thought what I would like to do, I spoke with Charlotte this morning because I wasn't sure if I was going to come to the sanctuary or not. I wish I had now, but I wanted to bring this with me. And that's another thing, within the church, with the reconciliation, you need to open the doors so that smudging can be done, if it will be done, within the church buildings. So I wanted to offer this to you all. For this gift of life. We say Kachimikwech for the beauty and the strength that you have placed within each of us. We give you thanks that the mosaic and the puzzle of life, that sometimes it seems that the pieces are all mixed up. But we give you thanks for having given some of us a different walk of life. Because in your wisdom, we know that you have done that. Because somehow we are able to carry that. I ask for continuation of strength and of love. For all of our global family. LGBTQ2, trans, bi, two-spirit. There was a reason that you gave us what many of us at times see as a burden to carry amongst all the other everyday things that we have in life sometimes, and we wonder why. There's a reason that you placed us in the specific role of helping to bring the balance between the men and between the women, as is the balance of everything in creation that you have given us this place to look after. Not just only a few things, but we need look not only after the flowers, but also the weeds. Not only the trees, but its roots. Not just the waterfalls, but the stagnant waters too. To help replenish, refresh them, to re-love them. We give you thanks for this day around the globe, that we may pause and we think of those that by birth have to, in countries where they are, have daily obstacles that many of us here in North America can take more or less for granted, that we still have more freedoms and some more rights than many or most of the world elsewhere. We think of those that have gone before us, for whom it was too much to carry this bundle. We pray that the church that we love open its doors wider and quicker, because the circle can never be complete without every spirit that needs to have its place. We will never be whole if we leave one out. We give you thanks for those that are in leadership today and our ancestors from before. And we give you thanks for those that are coming up right behind us, our new ones, our young ones, who will be those that are making huge inroads today. We give you thanks for those that already cleared out some of the pathways, so it's a little bit easier to walk along. Creator, in all of this, we're reminded of the love of Jesus Christ. As hard as it is sometimes, it is there. Help us to search for it, to find it, especially these days. Give us the strength and the sheer stubbornness to dig a little deeper, to look a little further, to look up, despite it all that is thrown at us on a daily basis. For this, I say miigwech to our Nishwase Mashomsa, Nishwase Nukmashak, our 7 grandfathers, our 7 grandmothers, who gave us those teachings as two-spirit people, as LGBTQ2 people, that we were given both sets of teachings, both the men's teachings and both the women's teachings, so that we may help balance the circles that we inhabit, near and far, and continuously changing. We say miigwech for this day around the globe. We think of those who have gone before us, who for them it was too much to carry. Aho, ni som sam, ni sam na to, ni som na snam, ni sam na to, ni som na snam, ni sam na to, ni som na snam, som na to. Aho, kachimikwach.
Thank you, RW, for your experiences and your stories, and for closing our circle here today with that wonderful prayer. So thank you so much. We appreciate it. I am so thankful for every single one of you. I want to give a really big thank you to Gary, to Aaron, to Melissa, Dorothy, Emmett, Sally, and RW for taking the time to join me today and to share stories with you. I also want to thank Richard and Brad, who helped behind the scenes with the tech and the audio. And I also want to thank you for your patience with some of the Zoom and tech issues that have been burdening us for the last year and a half with COVID. So I appreciate that. And I also appreciate and want to thank you all for tuning in and listening and hearing these stories and learning a little bit more about the experiences behind those of us who experience homophobia, transphobia, and biphobia. So I hope everyone has a great rest of your day and a great rest of your week. And thank you again for joining us, and we'll see you soon at the next event. So thank you. Goodbye.